Welcome back to the Retro Horror Academy. My name is Daniel Richardson, and today we're going to be talking about the year in horror, 1927. Now, to be honest, not a whole lot is changing with the genre, and no real major news to talk about other than the movies that we're going to be, ranking, ahead. So let's just get right into the show. Before we get started on the rankings, though, we got to add to our new segment, the Horror Hall of Fame, and we have a new inductee. And who is that inductee? Edgar Allan Poe. He is the fourth inductee to the Horror Hall of Fame for those who are keeping track at home. And the main thing we're doing right now with this, if you go back to, we started doing this on the episode when we covered 1924, we are building a foundation, and everybody we're inducting here laid that foundation for horror. It's kind of funny because, with the exception of the first inductee, which was George Melas, the other three are all authors. But what really separates, because George Melas, he directed the very first horror film, so I mean that, he gets in right there. But the other authors, Mary Shelley and Robert Louis Stevenson, yeah, they're in. They belong, don't get me wrong, they definitely deserve their spot in the Horror Hall of Fame, but they are really only in for one, novel apiece. Mary Shelley's in there for Frankenstein, and Robert Louis Stevenson is in there for The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But what separates Edgar Allan Poe from those two, he's more prolific, and with what we've used, I mean, on this show alone, Dr. Gordon's System, Eerie Tales, The Plague of Florence, The Avenging Conscience. Also during this period, The Pit and the Pendulum, Telltale Heart, Murder at the Rue Morgue. I mean, the list goes on and on. He's definitely a heavyweight in the world of horror. And so, yes, for everything you've contributed to horror and to, still to come. I mean, we're only in 1927, so I mean, the road is still so far ahead of us. We're going to be seeing so much more. The Raven, So, thank you, Mr. Poe, for your contributions to the horror community, and yes, welcome, to the Horror Hall of Fame. So now we got that out of the way, let's get into our list. There are 3 horror films from 1927 that we're going to be talking about. So all 3 of them are winning awards. So let's get into it. What is the number 3 horror film of 1927 and the winner of the Bronze Skull Award? The Spider's Web. Here's the thing. When this movie came out, it was kind of panned, not just critically, but didn't make much money. It would get a remake a few years later in Britain. I think really the less we know about or say about this, the better. So we'll just kind of move right along now. Let's go over to the number 2 horror film of 1927 and the winner of the Silver Skull Award. I'm talking about The Unknown. So, The Unknown is about a criminal who is trying to escape the police, so he ends up joining the circus, posing as a double amputee to, evade the police. But in doing so, he falls in love with the circus manager's daughter, and he decides that, no matter what, he's going to get her to be his girlfriend. So at this point, Todd Browning and Lon Chaney, they have been a great team with a great formula. At this point, Lon Chaney is just a megastar. Not just a horror movie star. I'm talking movie star in general. Although he would be known for his horror films. Even though, the word horror isn't even associated with these movies yet. They're still just known as macabre dramas and movies with a darker tone. But, with his past, Lon Chaney has already launched himself up into the stratosphere. So when this movie came along, Universal just pretty much gave these guys, hey, do whatever you guys want. Go ahead and make your movie. Todd Browning got this idea, actually. He heard a true story about a guy who, joined the circus just to get away from the police. And I don't think the double amputee thing was anything about, at all about that. But either way, he added that to, add a little more color to it. Lon Chaney at this point, he's already got an established track record. I mean, you look back at his previous films, you got Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Penalty, The Monster. I mean, the guy is already, pretty much dominated, this genre already. And so, yeah, this is just add another notch to his belt. This also has a very young Joan Crawford. In fact, it's kind of interesting. She said in an interview that, when she first started out, acting in these silent movies, she said all it really was, most people just get in front of the camera and just react. And it wasn't until she actually started working with Lon Chaney that she knew what it was like to actually act. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, I don't know, I feel like, Lon Chaney gets all the credit in the world, and deservedly so, for his special effects makeup and really just being these iconic characters like the Hunchback or the Phantom. But no one really kind of praises him for his acting. And I feel like after kind of watching him play all these different characters, it's like, no, he definitely deserves all of that. So the fact that Joan Crawford even kind of gives him those props is kind of cool. At least I thought so. So anyways, this movie comes out, and the one thing that a lot of critics said, most, the contemporary critics and, of course, the retrospective critics, they all said the same thing, that this movie was very dark, very disturbing, and really just kind of, pushed the limits of what was acceptable for that day. But, with that being said, it was still a huge hit, and people loved it. Funny thing would be is this movie was actually thought to be lost for many years. There was a fire in the Universal Studios, and apparently, this movie was thought to be gone. And it wasn't until many years later, and it was either like in the 50s or something like that, where in a warehouse over in France, they found a bunch of film cans and boxes with different, pieces of film in there, and they all were marked unknown because they were just random pieces of film thrown together. However, there was one, can that was marked the unknown, but they just assumed it was just more unknown stuff. They didn't know what they had, and so when someone finally went through all the footage and then found, like, holy crap, here's that missing movie, they were able to, ship it back to America, and then they, preserved it and re-released it and all that stuff. Unfortunately, the original runtime of The Unknown, I believe, was like an hour and 40 minutes, and with scenes missing from this thing, it only runs 50 minutes today. However, after watching it, it doesn't seem like there's really anything missing. Like, this runs at a really crisp pace. I mean, really nice and fluid. The only thing I can really think of that's probably missing, aside from just random character development, was Chaney's missing buddy. He goes missing, like, at the end, or like, it was missing buddy, sorry, his little sidekick. But then at the end, he's just gone. So it's like, I can guess there must have been a scene there where he left, or maybe Chaney murdered him. I don't know, but either way, that little guy just disappears out of nowhere. But 15 minutes is all we got. Taking a drink, everybody. So what did I think about The Unknown? It's funny. I really assume, I think, when everybody thinks about the movies from 1927, when you have, these three films in front of you, I think everyone assumed this is probably going to be number one. I actually assumed that, I'd get outvoted on this one. However, this is one of the few times where, the Academy and myself agree. Yes, this was a good movie. I enjoyed it. However, I will say this. I feel like it was very overhyped for me, because even before I even, started, retracing these silent films and watching them, again, I heard of The Unknown. I've known about it. I heard that it was disturbing or whatever. So I really thought I was going to see some fucked up shit. Like, some pre-code, Hays Code, fucked up, disturbing, messed up, whatever, a bleak movie. And I don't know. I don't think it hits that level. At least I don't feel that way. And I feel like that's another thing. Like, maybe people are feeling sorry for the Chaney character, but I really don't in this one. Don't get me wrong. He's played a numerous amount of psychopaths who go crazy in the end and, end up killing somebody. But every one of those characters he played before, they always start out good. The Penalty. Yes, he's a legless mobster who's just ruthless and will kill anybody. But it wasn't his fault that he was like that. A doctor made a mistake, and due to a wrong diagnosis, had to cut his legs off. You jump ahead to the Hunchback of Notre Dame. He was this disfigured hunchback that everyone picked on in the village. So it's like, yeah, he was kind of driven to this. Phantom of the Opera, same thing. A guy messed up, deformed, wants nothing but love, and because of the way he looked, he feels he has to hide himself from society. So you feel for him, but this character in The Unknown, he starts off as a criminal. He's already a convicted killer, or a wanted killer who's hiding in the circus, pretending to have his arms amputated just so he can evade the law. And it's just like, that's not a good guy. Now on top of that, he's just trying to trick this girl into loving him. Like, there's nothing sympathetic about Chaney at all in this movie. Now, don't get me wrong, he's a great actor in this. I'm not saying anything about the acting. I'm just saying, character-wise, this is not one of his, favorites, I would think. But with that said, I think Chaney does a great job here playing like this armless guy, or has two arms at one point, but he goes back and forth on it. Seeing him use his feet, which I did hear that at times he did have a double do the feet stuff for him, but he did do quite a bit of it himself as well. So again, throwing himself into a role. Just another memorable, shocking, role. And I thought it was kind of neat, too, because he said in an interview, he never takes these roles, like the Phantom or the Hunchback or this armless guy here. He never takes these roles to shock people. He really only takes them because he finds, the drama of the characters very interesting to play. And again, even though I disagree with the character, there's still humanity in this character when you see, Chaney portray him. I'm saying right now, I've never watched any other silent films other than horror. Like, that's all I've ever watched. I never watched any dramas or, I guess I did see a couple sci-fi, but nothing major. I stick with horror. But as of right now, all I've seen and all the actors I've seen out there, I gotta say, as of right now in 1927, the best actor, period, Lon Chaney. Hands down, there's just no question about it. Lon Chaney is the best in the game right now. So yes, The Unknown, number 2. So that leaves us with just one film, number 1 horror film of 1927, and the winner of the Golden Skull Award, The Cat and the Canary. So this old rich guy, millionaire, he dies, and he decides that on the 20th anniversary of his death, he will have his will read in his spooky mansion for all his relatives to hear. So this was based on a play, popular stage play at the time, by the same name. And when the producers reached out actually to the guy who wrote the play to get the rights for it, the author actually turned him down initially, saying that he didn't want to put this in the film because he was afraid that if everybody watched the movie with the twist ending, then they wouldn't give a shit about the play. And of course, it wasn't the case. The movie was a hit. The play continued to be a hit. So it was kind of he kind of worried about nothing there. But I just kind of thought it was interesting that I don't know, it just seems kind of funny that that plays were such a big deal. I guess plays are still a big deal here, but more often than not, people are going to talk about movies or TV other than stage plays. And so it's just kind of funny here that he was kind of threatened that his stage play would be ruined by this film. So I don't know. Taking a drink. So, movie comes out. It's a huge hit. Paul Lenny directed this, and he's been on our countdown before. What I really think is fascinating about this movie, and a lot of people have said this, this isn't just me coming up with this. When I read this, I found it to be so true that at this era, at this time, when people would adapt stage plays to cinema and put it on the big screen, it was really like you're just watching a play on the screen. Meaning, when you're in the audience watching a play, it's just, boom, it's static. It's all there. It's up on the stage. There is no camera movements. There's none of You're just looking at it. Whereas this is one of the few times where, Paul Lenny's direction was phenomenal. Like the way he was moving the camera. I mean, we were getting POV shots. We were getting, tracking shots down the corridor, turning corners. High angle shots. Again, a lot of camera movement, push-ins and stuff like that. And you never did see that. Even the opening credits was kind of unique. It had a hand wiping off this dusty screen, and then the titles were behind it. Speaking of titles, the inner titles of this movie, a lot of more animated. The words would come up and kind of move around and just add a little bit more flavor to the movie. And I'll tell you right now, I think it worked out really good. I feel like there's no unnecessary movement. In fact, no one else was really doing this at this time, with the exception of maybe F.W. Manu, director of Nosferatu. But even then, it's like not to this level, and really not this well. I mean, this is a masterclass, really. This movie would actually, not only would be, popular now, it would get several remakes. It was remade like 3 or 4 more times. Once as a TV movie. I want to say they did it in Britain as well. I think it was Britain. I don't know, somewhere overseas they did it. But most notably, the 1939 version with Bob Hope as one of the main characters. So, what did I think about this movie? Honestly, I really dug it. I thought, again, I'm agreeing with the Academy on this one. We were total agreements. And, I just think this was just a better film. For me, I didn't know what to expect. I will say, there are certain silent films we've watched that you had to slog through. It was just like, fuck, boring and long and nothing's going on. But this one, I don't know. The pace is quick. It keeps going. There's a lot of humor. This is definitely more of a horror comedy. In fact, this is actually just kind of jumped in on the subgenre of the old dark house films. This ain't the first one. The first one was definitely probably One Exciting Night by D.W. Griffith, but this would continue that tradition. You'd also have Ghostbreaker, and later on The Old Dark House by James Wells. And this is honestly, from the ones I've seen, this is the best one. Because I've seen Old Dark House, not jumping ahead, that's later on, but I didn't care for it. And One Exciting Night, my God, that was just one dull movie. Of all the ones I've seen, this is the best one so far. Like I said, the humor is kind of, it depends on your taste. I know humor's subjective, and it's old style, goofy kind of humor. But when it does hit, it hits really well. And the mystery itself, I thought was really good. Like, honestly, I was honestly shocked by the ending. And I know that may sound ridiculous, but when they reveal, who the cat is, because you're told like it's there's a maniac and he thinks he's a cat and he's running around. You got your characters in the house, and if it's gonna be a whodunit, there's only like 1 or 2 years. Like, yeah, they're definitely them. And only because I guess I just figured there wasn't going to be any red herrings in this. I just assumed it would be straightforward. I didn't suspect who it winds up being, and I was like, holy crap. So I was honestly shocked when I watched it. Even though this may be as shocking as a Scooby-Doo mystery, I still was not expecting it. So for that alone, I definitely praise this movie. And then, like I said, again, the direction, the acting, the humor, the story. I just think everything's just well done. The only thing that's kind of odd to me, and I don't know, maybe you guys can clear this up, they're all supposed to be relatives, right? Like heirs to the throne, possibly. They make it seem like they're all related, but somehow at the end, the main guy and the main girl end up hooking up, and I'm like, that's your cousin, bro. And then I got one scene where the dude in the glasses is like hiding underneath the bed, watching his aunt and cousin strip down, and he's peeking through his fingers. It's like, again, that's family, man. I don't know. And again, I know this is back in the day. I mean, we just inducted a guy who married his cousin, and didn't Jerry Lee Lewis also marry his cousin? I don't know. At a different time, I guess. Cousin Lovin' was okay. I'm not one to judge. I just thought it was a little odd. But you know what? For 1927, this was a hell of a movie. So there you have it. To do the final recap, Edgar Allan Poe is inducted into the Horror Hall of Fame. The number 3 movie and Bronze Skull winner was The Spider's Web. The number 2 movie and the winner of the Silver Skull was The Unknown. And the number 1 horror film in 1927 and the winner of the Golden Skull, The Cat and the Canary. So guys, that is it for the Retro Horror Academy. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daniel Richardson, and you're dismissed.